Hello, Dr. Brody again for Torah Topics, and today I would like to discuss the fact that in Yiddishkeit we don't rely on a single person's testimony of a miracle. In fact, we see that during the exodus from Egypt, millions of people, both the Jews and the Egyptians, demonstrated, saw, and attested to the fact that the Ribbon Shel Olam created amazing miracles in front of both nations. So, the first thing we'd like to discuss is the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was standing on Har Sinai, standing on Mount Sinai, and he said to the Ribbon Shel Olam, "How will the Jews know that you sent me?" He said, I'm nobody. They don't know who I am. They made me remember me from years and years and years ago. But the truth is that I'm not a person who they would be respectful of. So the Ribbon Shel Olam says, look, I will send Aaron with you. Now, Aaron was one of the leaders of Klal Yisroel. They knew him. They knew that he led the people, that he was a prophet. And his word was well respected. So it so happens that Aaron meets Moshe Rabbeinu in the middle of the desert, and they travel to Egypt. Now, the first thing they do is they when they're asked by the people, who sent you, they say, I am that I am sent me. Now that was a code word that had been imprinted in Jewish consciousness way, way back before the destruction, before the Jews were brought to Egypt. And that was significant, but yet Moses had to perform the three miracles. The miracle of the snake throwing his rod down and turning into a snake. The miracle of putting his hand into his robe and bringing out a leprous hand. Of taking a pitcher of water from the Nile and turning it into blood. This wasn't done in front of one or two people who later attested to the fact that they saw it. This was done in front of the 70 people who were the heads of the Sanhedrin and who represented all of Klal Yisroel. And they reported back to the rest of Israel, yes, we saw it. We saw what Moshe and Aaron did. And in fact, it's a true thing. It was an absolute miracle, they said. So you see that all of the things that were done by Moshe and the Ribbon Shel Olam were done in front of the multitude of people. Then the Ribbon Shel Olam told Moshe to go down and speak to Paro. Paro was taking his morning shirutim, his daily functions in the river, and he was washing. And you can be sure this was a king of great renown, a king of millions of people. He didn't just go down to the river by himself. He had guards there. He had people watching the area. They were careful to make sure that he has privacy. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu was able to walk right into where he's standing and confront him. It's a miracle all by itself. And done in front of the king of Egypt, and done in front of all of his guards and all of his attendants. It was an amazing thing that such a thing happened. But you see that what we see happening in the Chumash is that the Ribbon Shel Olam made sure that all of the people of Egypt saw and heard what was going on. Now, why am I saying this? Because many other religions attest to miracles that their particular Mashiach formed for them. but only usually to one or two or three people who later said, yeah, we saw this happen. No. In Yiddishkeit, all of the miracles are performed in front of a multitude of people. Yeah. This is the natural course of events in Yiddishkeit. Everything is open, everything is spoken about, everything is publicized, and it's not something that happens just like this, just in front of one or two people. It's open testimony to all of the world that is a case of what happened. Now, the next thing that we see is that each one of the 10 plagues, which took place over a year, were heavily publicized. Moshe Rabbeinu came in front of Paro and said, this is what's going to happen. Be assured that it will happen. And it did. It happened in front of his entire court. In fact, we see that the magicians and the soothsayers who were involved in the first and second and third plagues came and said to Paro, don't you see that Egypt is being destroyed? Let this man and his people go. Yet Paro was a supreme king. He is a deity. He was praised and he was holy. And what he said happened. Nobody had any arguments about Paro. They could have argued against him, and his advisors argued against him. But what he said was the word and the law. Now, each one of the plagues was testified by both the Jews, the Jewish nation, and also by the Egyptians. Their cattle were destroyed. They had boils. They sat up for 3 days in darkness. They had locusts. They had wild animals. And then the ultimate plague, the killing of the firstborn. In fact, the killing of the firstborn was such a traumatic experience for the Egyptians that before it actually happened, the Egyptians revolted. All the firstborn, there was a firstborn in every home, and they revolted. They wanted to commit a revolution, as we see happening today in Egypt. But Paro had his way, and he said no, and then there was the killing of the firstborn. Again, we see an advertisement. We see that the Ribbon Shalom and Paro and Moshe were all tied together, and that everybody knew that this was happening. And then we see that in fact it did happen. Saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. An amazing thing. They actually didn't see the death of the Egyptians before that, because they were hidden by the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke. So they didn't see the destruction of the Egyptians. But at the sea, they saw 250,000 dead Egyptian soldiers. And Josephus says that that's how many there were, dead on the sea. And they were covered with gold that Paro gave them so that they would come and fight. And they took the gold, and then they said that the Ribbon Shalom was the king of the universe, and that he should live forever and ever. So actually what I wanted to say today was, we are talking about a religion that is based on prophecy and based on the fact that more than millions and millions and millions of people saw all of this action taking place. And that's the difference between Yiddishkeit and the other religions.